I'm going to define the three jobs: mixing, mastering, and producing, in as simple terms as I can from a perspective of what it really means to be those people in each position. It's a different thing, and it's going to be layman's terms. That's not going to be super scientific, because it's more important to really understand this, because it'll tell you exactly what you should be focusing on. If you're a mixer, this is a distorted version of what JJP said. It's an amazing quote by JJP. It's something along the lines of, if you're a mixer, you're a translator between what an artist hears in their head for how their song should sound and the way it actually winds up. You're the bridge. You connect those two things. And that's why it takes a lot of technical skill to be able to clear things out of the way, especially if it wasn't recorded as well as it could have been. Or there's always some compromises made no matter what you're doing on the recording end. And it's the same thing in mixing. It's, are your decisions the correct ones for making those compromises so that the artist at the end can fully realize their own vision? It's really what it is. It may be slightly different than they pictured it, but if they're starting to be able to like visualize a scene where their song is now a reality, if they're able to sort of smell it, feel it, taste it, touch it, when they hear it, their emotions are getting involved. It's more senses than just their hearing happening. You know you've done something right. That's allowing them to realize the thing they created in their head before they ever recorded the song, essentially. And that's the beauty of what a mixer does. Let's talk mastering for a second. In my opinion, a mastering engineer's job is to do no harm like a doctor. They have to make the mixer's vision better if possible, but in no way, shape, or form can it be worse. Because in mixing, we do things like limit, compress, stereo imaging. There's so many things we're going to take advantage of that if a mastering engineer comes along and changes that vision, whether it's over compress or over clip or limit too much, this is going to happen because not everybody's created equal as a mastering engineer. So the same thing would be the case for mixing engineers too. I'm not saying one is different than the other. I'm basically saying we all have access to the same tools. Some of us may have more hardware than others, but mainly the tools that exist for one job are the same tools for the other job. So when you think about it, you're basically having someone else come in who's got the same tools you have to take what you've done and make it better. It doesn't always become better. Some things that top engineers mix, they get passed through mastering. Like, can you just pass it through so that, it gets duplicated, it gets put on the album, but just don't do what you've done to it. Don't limit it that much. Don't compress it just don't. Can you just don't? It's happened. I don't want people to think it's such a rarity. It happens sometimes if they don't beat the mix. So when you think about it like this is where I always tell people, make a mix sound the way you want it. That's where you have the opportunity to really sweat with the band, getting them to like, or just to reply and talk to you and back and forth. So you make a version they really love. Once that happens, someone else in mastering then takes over. And a lot of times the communication might be substantially less. They might not have sweat over it the way they did with the mixing engineer. And now you're sort of leaving a lot of it up to this other person and less communication to change the sound. It's going to be better if the mastering engineer is great, and it can be made better, but that's not always the case. It's not always going to be better in mastering. That's just something I want everybody to understand. There's some guys who can master things and make it a little better, and that's little, so do no harm, very little. The difference should be slight, because if they change a lot of it, then they're really imparting a lot into the sound. And if a mixing engineer took the time and the band okayed it and it sounded amazing, there's not a lot of room for a lot of changing. That's kind of what I want you to understand. So it's a really kind of hold yourself back type of a job. It's, can I improve this in some way? And if not, then I'm going to do as little as possible to not hurt it. Like, that's what it is. So moving away from that, producing. What's producing? Producing, in as simply put as I can make it, is, and this I actually got from reading an interview by a very, very well-known and famous producer talking with Rick Rubin. The interview wasn't with him and Rick Rubin, but it was he talks about a discussion he had with Rick Rubin in the interview. And he basically says the best advice he ever got was when he played Rick Rubin a bunch of songs that he had done that he thought were all hits. And Rick Rubin says, "This is great. Are these all the same artist?" And the dude was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "These songs all sound very well produced and the quality's great, but it sounds like all the same artist. And your job as a producer is actually to deliver the artist's sound. What does each artist sound like? Don't give them your sound, which is the only way that all these things would sound like the same artist, is if you're giving them your sound as a producer. You shouldn't do that. Instead, you should give them their sound. What is their sound?" So I found that extremely interesting, very profound. And when I'm referring to a producer now, I'm not referring to someone who makes beats. I'm referring to the technical, traditional definition of what a producer is. Somebody who works with artists and to realize their vision, right, of what a song would be, the artist's vision, and they help them achieve that. And in that role, what Rick Rubin does, his goal is to get the artist sound as best as he possibly can, what they are about, what they sound like, not deliver his own sound. That's why so many of the things Rick Rubin does, you never really know Rick Rubin did it. You love it, and then you check and you realize Rick Rubin did it later once you realize, once you go deep. But the bottom line is he doesn't have a thing that you can identify and be like, "Oh, yep, that's definitely Rick. Rick must have done this." In my opinion, it's not like that. He has his flavor preferences, of course. For example, he doesn't like reverb. Not probably on everything, but a lot of the records that he's produced, especially like the Chili Peppers stuff, he goes light on the verb. He doesn't want it there. I recall a conversation between him and I think it was on the Audio Slave record, where he was producing the Audio Slave record, and he was like talking to Rich Costi, and they took down a bunch of verb on stuff. I believe that's what it was. It was with Brendan O'Brien too on the Blood Sugar Sex Magic stuff, if I'm not mistaken. He was all about let's get rid of the reverb kind of thing. So I'm not remembering exactly which albums that was. I just know it on both of those albums there's not a whole lot of verb on things. So let's face it, when it comes down to what it is about a mixer that's different than a producer and a mastering engineer in terms of sound. A mixer like Serban has a sound. When people think of what a modern mix sounds like, it's probably mixed by Serban that you're thinking, most likely, because he's dominating the charts for a long time. And as a result, most of the stuff is his. So his sound is all over everything. So when you picture modern sound, you picture him. You can't help it. So I also think it's okay in a way for a mixer to have a sound, but if you're one of these people who don't like the way Serban's mixes sound, then you don't like a lot of the stuff that's out there because, like I said, he has a sound. And the interesting thing about that is that I believe it has nothing to do with the exact plugins he's using or any of that to create that sound. It's what he hears in his head. It's how he hears the music, what he wants from it that allows him to cut and boost in whatever areas he does what he does, and then it makes it sound the way it does. And if I had to describe it in like one word, I'd say like airy, super airy, like on top. Feels like there's Sparkle City going on up there. Like I'm in Emerald City walking around. I don't know what's Emerald City from. It's from the show Oz. It's a good show. But that's what I'm picturing. I'm just picturing air. I don't know. It feels like I'm floating when I listen to those songs. Now, I love his mixes. I am a fan. And I can tell you that when you listen to a lot of the stuff he does, he has such a breadth of work through so many different genres. And he has a way to make them all work and his mixes sound great. And you may not agree, but the point is, he's getting the work. He's getting hired. So somebody agrees. A lot of people agree. The people with the dough agree that are making the records that they want him to do it. And a lot of that could also be that they want to hedge their bets. In other words, they spent all this money on making the record. They want to make sure it sounds as good as the other records out there, so they cover their bets by giving it to the best and paying the most money to do it because he's top billing. So, at least at this point, when I released this video, he was top billing. I don't know if this will be seen 20 years from now in a time capsule, but he's top billing right now. So anyway, I think about it, I'm like, okay, so as a mixer, it's obviously okay to have a sound because you get someone who has a career like that, and he clearly has a sound, so that's okay. But as a producer, it's not okay. And as a mastering engineer, it's definitely not okay to have your own sound that you add to a thing, because that would mean you're doing too much of something. That's what that would mean. And as a mastering engineer, it's like, you ever hear the expression, I want the kids to be seen but not heard kind of thing? That's kind of what you want out of a mastering engineer. I never liked that expression when anyone ever said it, but when you think about a mastering engineer, you want the stuff to be somehow a little bit improved, but I don't want to hear how, because if I hear how, then it's over something. Something's overcooked. Something's too much, probably. Unless you're one of these people who relies on the mastering engineer to do a lot of heavy lifting, which, in my opinion, is a huge bag of worms. Learn how to mix well to the point where you're not hoping someone saves your mix in mastering. If you're doing that, you need to be learning how to mix better, and you need to be hiring someone to mix until that happens if you want stuff to sound great. But I wouldn't, or take lessons, like put in the work, just do a lot of stuff, Everyone could always get better. I could always get better. Everyone could always get better. Okay, but when it comes to, don't leave it up to mastering to bring your stuff up to 10 dB or to give you the song to sound the way you want. If you're like, this mix sounds terrible, but I'm going to give it to mastering and hope for the best, that's the opposite of what you should be doing. So if you're one of those guys, then you want the mastering engineer to do something, in which case you're messing up this whole pie. The whole puzzle is going to fall apart. It's Jenga. It's all over. So anyway, I think you guys get what I'm saying here. So I'm going to end it there. I'm really curious what you guys think. It's sort of a philosophical way to look at each of the jobs, and it might help you to kind of figure out where you fit in. Like, what is it you're really trying to do? And go from there, Questions, comments, answers, throw it in there. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe. Talk to you guys soon. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.